Queensland storyteller, I'm Kim Dodsworth. Now, surprise endings in short story writing are just that, a surprise. But not all surprises are equal. Some are more surprising than others. I guarantee you that this Australian story is not your run-of-the-mill ho-hum surprise, but an unexpected kick-in-the-gut surprise, and it's one that's worthy of the most exalted masters of the short story writer's art. It's called Confessions. It's by Darrell, Pitt of Wollongong, New South Wales. I discovered it in Short and Twisted 2007, a book published by Cellophane Press.
David? Yes, Mum. What date is it? He told her. David? Yes, Mum. I have something to confess. David studied his mother's withered face. She lay in the bed, her frail body barely denting the mattress. She had lost her body to cancer, one piece at a time. First her breasts, then the tumour in her stomach. The doctors had cut out the growths, believing the cancer was finally gone. But a year later it had returned with a vengeance, infecting her liver, intestines and uterus. They were clogged with it. She would not reach her next birthday, but she had no regrets. Drugs kept the pain at bay. Now she was playing a waiting game, until the end came. David had been up all night with her as she played out this final drama. His body ached with tension. He glanced out the window. The sky began to brighten as the sun rose. It had been a long night. Her bony fingers clasped his hand. I said, I have to confess something. David leaned forward in his chair. He looked into her blue eyes. They were half closed, but they still held a brightness. He could still see the laughter behind them. That was what he remembered of his mother, her laughter. She was always making jokes, always seeking out the funny side of life. And she was good through and through. He had never known a better person. What could she possibly have to confess? Mum, he said, I'm sure you've done nothing wrong, but do you want to speak to a priest? No, God will know soon enough. But you're my son. You should also know. He spoke softly. What should I know? The room was quiet. There was his mother's breathing, the gentle creak of his chair as he tried to relieve the ache of sitting, the whine of a car on a distant road. For a long time her breathing was so regular that he wondered if she had fallen asleep again. The drugs that killed her pain also held her at the edge of consciousness. I'm a murderer, she said. David jolted. He sat back in his chair, staring at his mother's lips, wondering if he had heard her correctly. She peered up at him with friendly blue eyes. I'm sorry, Mum, what did... I'm a murderer. This time he could not deny what he heard, but the idea was ridiculous. She must be speaking metaphorically. He searched for a suitable response. What have you killed? Men, she said. I've killed men. Mum, I don't think you know what you're saying. Maybe you should rest. No, she said forcefully. I know exactly what I'm saying. You must listen to me. You must know the truth. Someone must know what I've done. He nodded. Her eyes focused into his. I can't explain why I did such terrible things, she said, but you must know that I did them. She had such a reasonable tone and such an earnest yearning in her voice that it sent a shiver up David's spine. He shook his head. She must be hallucinating. The drugs have made her believe things that aren't real. As if reading his mind, his mother shook her head back at him. I'm not imagining things, she said. I've done great evils. I've killed men for pleasure, to satisfy my own desires. His mind in a whirl, he asked, How many men did you kill? She swallowed. About 40. David's mouth fell open. She must be delirious. How could she? I'm not mad, she said. I'm telling you the truth. There's at least 40, maybe as many as 50. How? I strangled them, she said. When? The word caught in his throat. She stopped and sank into a deep thought. I don't recall, really. I guess it started about half a century ago at the boarding house. His mother had owned a boarding house in the city. She bought the business after his father died. David had already left home and was 2 years into university. At first he had been concerned about her being a single woman running a business like that. He had done his best to talk her out of it, but she had politely ignored him. In the end, his fears had been unfounded. She built a thriving business, employed several staff, and successfully housed hundreds of boarders over the years, mostly old men. On more than one occasion, she had surprised him with her fighting spirit. She had written to him about her confrontations with abusive drunks looking for a fight. She had always managed to pacify them and keep them under control, being more a mother to them than a landlady. I've had time to consider what I did and why. I couldn't have a normal, loving relationship after your father died. If there was a man I liked, I couldn't have him like a normal woman. I had to own him. David's mind was reeling. A lot of men had passed through her doors over the years. Many of them were transient. There one day, gone the next. More often than not, they disappeared without paying the rent. Of course, it would be the perfect place for a killer to select victims, removing them from society like a gardener removing weeds. He swallowed. What do you mean? I would invite them to dinner in my room, she explained. I had sleeping pills from Dr. Reynolds. And? David's voice became a whisper. I broke up the pills and put it in their food. I sat them on the lounge with an after-dinner drink, a scotch or a brandy, with another pill broken up in the drink. They were out like a light in minutes. I would look at them lying there, helpless. I tried to stop myself. So many times I tried to stop myself, but I couldn't. I had a length of cord in the cupboard. I would take the cord, wrap it around their neck, and strangle them. I wanted to own them so completely, she said. Even after they were gone, I wanted to think that part of them remained with me, that part of them would never leave me. What did you do? David croaked. I cut a piece off each of them and ate it. David's shaking hand flew to his mouth. It wasn't a big piece, usually just part of an arm or a thigh. I would fry it on the stove, in brown sauce. That way they would always stay with me, and I would never be left alone. They would remain with me forever. David was so shaken by the horror of the situation that he couldn't speak, couldn't move. He sat frozen, his hand at his mouth, the world swirling around him. For a moment he thought he was going to faint. Leaning forward, he held his mother's hand tightly, trying to think of something to say. He couldn't. She had committed crimes that were completely against the social structure of any civilized society. She had killed men. She had broken the ultimate taboo. She had eaten parts of their bodies. Cannibalism. She had committed these crimes and got away with it. He looked out of the window. There was a long day ahead. God, there would be long weeks ahead. He would have to go to the police and confess her crimes. They would have to retrieve the bodies surrounded the boarding house. There would be a media frenzy. His mother may become known as one of history's most prolific serial killers. He looked at the grey-haired woman lying on the bed. It was hard to believe that she would lift a finger against anyone. Yet she was so earnest that he believed her entirely. David, she said. Yes, Mum. I love you. I know, Mum. David. Yes. April Fool, she said. And then she died. That's Queensland Storyteller for this week. I'm Kim Dodsworth.